On December 28, 1944, 12 days into the most desperate fighting of the Battle of the Bulge, American soldiers were freezing, bleeding, and dying in the forests and villages around Bastogne. Snow clogged their boots, ice stiffened their fingers, German artillery shattered the tree line day and night. The situation was still unresolved. The outcome was still uncertain. Inside a heated headquarters, far from the front lines, Supreme Allied Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower sat at his desk reading a memorandum that caused his hands to tremble, not with fear, but with controlled professional fury. This document had not come from Berlin. It had not come from the German High Command. It had come from one of his own allies, Field Marshal Bernard Law Montgomery. And what Montgomery was demanding was not merely inappropriate, it was incendiary. Montgomery was urging Eisenhower to immediately remove American commanders of the 1st and 9th Armies, not because they had been defeated in battle, not because they had broken under German pressure, but because, in Montgomery's judgment, they had failed at something far more basic. They had failed, he claimed, to keep their soldiers' feet dry. The timing of this accusation made it far worse. While the 101st Airborne Division was encircled, battered, and barely holding Bastogne after days of relentless German assaults, their own senior ally was drafting a bureaucratic indictment of American leadership from the comfort of a warm office. To Eisenhower, this was not constructive criticism. It was not professional disagreement. It was betrayal in the middle of an existential crisis. He reread the memo, hoping he had misunderstood. He had not. Montgomery was arguing that American generals were morally unfit to command, that their failure to manage basic soldier welfare, specifically trench foot, proved they lacked the professional competence required for modern war. And beneath the surface of this argument lay something far more dangerous. Montgomery was constructing a case to strip the United States of command authority over its own armies. The language of the memo was calm, clinical, and devastatingly contemptuous. Montgomery cited data showing American trench foot cases occurring at nearly 3 times the rate of British forces operating in the same weather. The numbers were staggering. Over 45,000 American soldiers affected. Men losing toes, feet, in severe cases, entire limbs. Trench foot was not a minor inconvenience. It was excruciating tissue damage caused by prolonged exposure to cold and moisture. It meant permanent nerve injury, chronic pain, and in some cases, lifelong disability. It meant 19-year-olds realizing they would never walk normally again because their boots never dried. Trench foot was treated by Montgomery not as human suffering, but as evidence. Proof, in his mind, that American leadership was amateurish, that U.S. generals viewed war as a logistical spreadsheet rather than a professional craft. American troops were surviving on K rations for weeks at a time, rations designed to last 3 days. They were sleeping in frozen foxholes without proper rotation. Socks remained soaked for weeks. To Montgomery, this was not a supply failure. It was a command failure. British units, he argued, endured the same weather and terrain with far lower rates of non-battle casualties. Therefore, the difference had to be leadership. To Montgomery, American generals were not soldiers in the European tradition. They were businessmen in uniform, industrial managers who shuffled resources efficiently but failed to understand the timeless discipline required to keep men alive in mud, snow, and blood. War, in his view, was not an extension of corporate logistics. It demanded control, restraint, and professional rigor that mass production alone could not supply. But this was not simply a medical critique. It was a political maneuver. Montgomery recognized that the trench foot crisis offered leverage, an opportunity to reshape Allied command in his favor. By framing American losses as moral and professional failures, he could argue that British leadership was not merely preferable, but necessary. Privately, his contempt was even more explicit. In diaries and correspondence sent directly to Winston Churchill, Montgomery described American commanders as green, reckless, and dangerous to the Allied cause. He believed the United States, despite its industrial power, remained strategically immature. The implication was unmistakable. If American generals could not safeguard their soldiers' basic welfare, they could not be trusted with overall strategic authority. Montgomery wanted to transform his temporary command in the northern sector into a permanent British-led hierarchy. For a professional officer, being labeled an amateur is not just insulting, it is a declaration of incompetence. And Montgomery intended to take that judgment straight to the Prime Minister. His confidence was rooted in British military doctrine, forged through years of attritional warfare. Britain, by 1944, was running out of men. Every casualty mattered. The British Army had developed systems that treated soldier survival as a science. Rotations were enforced. Preventive care was mandatory. Foot inspections were routine. Dry socks were non-negotiable. Discipline was absolute. This was not softness, it was necessity. Britain could not replace losses the way America could. Preventable casualties were strategically unacceptable. Montgomery looked at American casualty figures and saw waste, avoidable suffering caused by reckless leadership. In some weeks of late 1944, American non-battle casualties from trench foot exceeded combat casualties inflicted by German fire. To Montgomery, this was proof that American generals were simply not very good at war. In early January 1945, he sent Churchill a private letter even harsher than the memo Eisenhower had received. American commanders, he wrote, were butchers. They did not know how to look after their men. The welfare crisis, he argued, validated his broader strategic objections to the American approach. Aggressive advances caused unnecessary suffering. The broad front strategy should be abandoned. His solution was straightforward. Give him command of all Allied forces north of the Ardennes, and give him their supplies. This was not just a bid for authority. It was a demand that Eisenhower divert fuel and ammunition away from Patton and Bradley to support British operations. Montgomery was using welfare concerns to justify starving the American offensive. Churchill read the letter with mounting unease. He understood exactly what Montgomery was attempting: a reordering of Allied power and personal credit for victory. Yet Churchill did not immediately shut him down. He advised patience, let events decide. Those events unfolded rapidly. General Omar Bradley learned of Montgomery's memo almost immediately. The Allied command leaked constantly. Bradley's reaction was instant and furious. He told Eisenhower that he would resign rather than serve another day under Montgomery's authority. Bradley carried his reputation as a soldier's general deeply. He was haunted by casualties from previous operations. To accuse him of indifference to his men was not just an insult, it was an attack on his character. He was not angry about criticism of Trenchfoot. He was enraged by hypocrisy. Montgomery was lecturing Americans about welfare while his own operations had annihilated British airborne forces. The same man preaching sock discipline had overseen one of the most disastrous Allied operations of the war. Bradley made his position unmistakably clear. If Montgomery took command of American armies, Bradley would resign and ensure the American public knew exactly why. George Patton's response was characteristically blunt. Montgomery wanted American soldiers comfortable in trenches, Patton said. Patton wanted them home by Christmas. The two philosophies could not be more different. American commanders believed the most humane act in war was ending it as fast as possible. 6 months of brutal, relentless advance would save more lives than 2 years of cautious management. Patton did not accept Trenchfoot as inevitable, but he viewed a stationary army as deadlier. Every day an army sat still was another day German artillery zeroed in. Speed was not recklessness, it was survival. American units pushed forward until fuel ran out. They ate cold rations because supply trucks couldn't keep pace. They slept wherever exhaustion overtook them because stopping to build camps meant giving the enemy time to recover. Montgomery's statistics were accurate. American trench foot rates were higher. But American operational tempo was also dramatically higher. Patton's Third Army covered distances in weeks that British forces took months to secure. French cities fell faster than supply lines could follow. German commanders were repeatedly caught before they could establish defenses. This pace had costs. Units outran logistics. Tanks waited for fuel. Soldiers scavenged food. Medical tolls mounted. But the speed shattered German recovery cycles. Every week gained denied the Wehrmacht time to fortify. Every breakthrough prevented the construction of defensive